Get started. My name is Brenda Fay. I'm really happy to be here as part of the planning committee, and I echo Stephen's sentiments about the wonderful group that we work with. We're really excited, as he mentioned, to start off our session with a panel presentation. And as we know, IRs are changing all the time, especially in healthcare and hospital settings. So we really wanted to, get their perspectives, these wonderful library leaders from around the country. And, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, does that look good? Does that look okay? Cheers, thanks so much. And we're so excited to have a wonderful panel for you this morning. We have Robin Champieux, Interim University Librarian at Oregon Health and Science University, Kristi Holmes, the Director of the Galter Health Science Library at Northwestern University, Associate Dean for Knowledge Management and Strategy, Professor of Preventative Medicine, Health and Biomedical Informatics, and Medical Education, Beth Mamo, Director of Libraries from Rochester Regional Health, Mary Piorun, Director of Library Services at UMass Chan Medical School, Director of NNLM Region 7, and Gabe Rios, Director of the Ruth Lilly Medical Library at the Indiana University School of Medicine. So I think you'll agree our panel is amazing. We'll invite you to use chat. We have planned about 4 questions for our panelists. We'll go through the panel and then we'll save some time for questions. So if you think of things, please go ahead and put those in chat. So we'd like to start out by inviting our panelists to kind of tell us a little bit about their IR, their platforms, a little bit about how it came to be, and then who's responsible for staffing and things like that. And Robin, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here, and thank you for the MIRL planners for inviting me. So we are using we do not have a fancy name for our institutional repository. We actually refer to it as OHSU Digital Collections. That was an intentional choice. And if we have time, maybe we can talk about that. We use 2 TIND platforms. So we use the TIND IR platform, and while not necessarily formally called an IR within this sort of TIND list of products, we also use their digital archive project as well. But from our users' point of view, this distinction between the two are invisible. So I thought it would be important to point that out. We've actually had an institutional repository for quite a few years, but our migration to TIND is actually very, very recent. We launched that in just in July after a couple years of both doing a selection process and then working through a migration, which is a great lead into the next question, because the team responsible for our IR have been working incredibly hard over the last 2 years. We have a working group that includes perspectives and roles across departments in the library, including our education, research, and clinical outreach team, technical team, and access services team. And that work is led by our digital scholarship and institutional repository librarian, Pamela Pierce.
Okay, I think I'm up next, so I'll just go ahead and jump in. Robin, are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to join you today. This is such an important topic of conversation. And so I'm especially excited myself just to get to hear about what other universities are doing or other organizations are doing in this space. I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. So anyway, I'm just delighted to join you today. So the name of our institutional repository is PRISM, and it's built on the Invenio RDM stack. To my brief history of our repository project is that when I arrived at Northwestern in 2014, we didn't have an institutional repository. So getting one up and running was definitely a priority, not only for me and for our library, but also for our medical school leadership. We selected Fedora 4 at the time, and we launched an institutional repository called Digital Hub shortly thereafter. And Digital Hub served our needs very well for a time, although I think we recognized with the looming NIH data management and sharing requirements that we would need to have infrastructure in place where we could feel confident to support those needs. Many of us, both in my library, myself, and lots of other people in the scholarly community have used the Zenodo repository at CERN for many years. And I know I've always appreciated the user-focused experience of that platform. So when it became time for us to begin to think about evolving our repository strategy, we reached out to the Zenodo team at CERN to learn more about their open source code. And they encouraged us to not implement their open source code at that time, but to partner with them on building a new Python-based modernized and modular framework that could be made available for the larger scholarly community. We thought that sounded like a great idea. We are always keen to approach things in a very collaborative way. And so we have, since that time, worked with CERN to launch the NVIDIA RDM open source community, which has now grown to over 30 universities and different consortia around the world. The mature code was launched last year, and we launched it as the PRISM repository at Northwestern earlier this year. Incidentally, we continue to collaborate with CERN's Zenodo team through not only this open source community, but we're also partnering on the Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative through the NIH Office of Data Science Strategy. With responsibility to, with regard to who is responsible for our repository here at Northwestern, we, again, continuing that theme of collaboration, we do take a very team-based approach to PRISM because I am a firm believer that success of library projects in general, and certainly something that is as complicated as a repository project, requires the full complement of library roles, perspectives, and expertise. So the responsibility for the repository, not only just making things, the general day-to-day making things work, but also strong engagement and advocacy with our community, sits in the Research Assessment and Communication Department and is led by Karen Gutzman. And the technical and developmental aspects of our repository sit in Galter's Digital Systems Department, which are led by Matt Carson. This is augmented by members of the rest of the library. So we have members of the Collection Management and Metadata Services team who ensure high quality metadata and discoverability of content and just bring a wealth of information and expertise to these conversations. Galter Special Collections, who not only contribute important content to the repository, but also lend expertise and critical perspective for our content. We have our Research and Information Services team and liaison librarians who are just a critical conduit to our community. And even, you know, we see our Access Services team who often serve a role as first contact for patrons who come into the library to ask questions or get contact or connected to repository resources and support. And then finally, I'm going to say our administration team, on which I'm a team member, where we do try and make sure that resources are in place for the team. We encourage the team. We try and also bring new opportunities and partnerships for the library and for our repository. And so with that, I will turn it over to Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristi, and thank you, planning team, for having me today. MIRL has been great the past couple of years. It's certainly helped us get our repository off the ground. I'm from Rochester Regional Health, and a little bit unique to the panel because we are not associated with the university. We are 9 hospitals with hundreds of ambulatory sites. We do have a LPN program and have just launched an LPN to RN program. So there is a little bit of education there, as well as our residency programs. We named our repository Rock Scholar. People that live here in Rochester, New York tend to refer to our hometown as the Rock. So it literally took us about 90 seconds to come up with this. It was pretty creative and we just went with it. We're pretty happy with it. We use Digital Commons, And the reason for that is because I was approached by some leaders in GME about wanting to start a journal. And so I did some legwork for them, and we landed at the Digital Commons platform and had a demo, and they at that time demoed the repository as well. And I made a point of saying I had always wanted a repository, because up until then we were manually collecting citations for the scholarly activity of our team. And it was very, obviously very tedious and ineffective. So I got real lucky, because anybody that works in healthcare knows how hard it is to get approval to add additional resources. But GME was really supportive. They got approval and they said, let's just do it. Let's get the repository too. So it was really great. But off we go. And I'm finding that I'm having a lot of responsibility in the production of this journal, have a brand new repository to figure out. And during this time, of course, we have the pandemic, but I also have several retirements, and unfortunately the death of a beloved staff member. And so my staff shrunk significantly. So for a while there, the repository was just hanging out and I was doing what I could when I could. But fortunately, I was allowed to hire Lisa Buddha, who is on this team. And she really came in with the skill set for this and the passion. I said, it's all yours. And she's taken it and run. So what you see today is really her great work. And she's doing all of it right now. We don't have any additional help. So I think that's it.
Is it my turn, Mary?
It is, Mary. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here today. Appreciate the invitation to talk to you about our repository, and I'm really glad that this conference continues on. Repositories has been such an important part of libraries that it's really been amazing to see how they've been embraced, and we'll hear more about that today. So our repository is named eScholarship at UMass Chan, and we have split our repository from both kind of documents and journal publishing. So we have split that up. So we have eScholarship at UMass Chan and eScholarship or publishing at UMass Chan as well. And we started way back in 2004. So I was just looking at that. That's like 19 years ago. We started with that, and we were looking to get an image database off the ground, and we were using this software called Cumulus, and we would meet at 9 a.m. on Monday mornings. And I'm still teased at picking that time, but it was a really exciting thing. It was a big part of my work at the time, and I was just excited to get in there and jump right in. In 2006, we migrated over to Digital Commons, and we had a Digital Commons installation for a really long time. And in fact, it was just last year in 2022 that we have migrated off of Digital Commons and are using Open Repository at MIRL, who is helping us to host that system and do some of the customization work. So as I said, our repository started off as an image database, and we were looking at that time at with partnering with dermatology and bringing in on dermatology images for the students to use. But what we ended up doing was, developing a few specialized collections. They started off mostly being student focused, and over time that has developed. We had one of our biggest supporters has been our Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences, and they decided to just require all students to deposit their theses in the repository. So it was a kind of a real strong endorsement from one of the deans, and it really gave us a good footing to reach out to individual faculty to start loading in their own scholarly works. Responsibility, earlier in the days, it started off as a team effort, and over time, as the repository has grown and responsibilities have changed and reorganizations, right now we have Lisa, who's part of the organizing committee here. She is our institutional repository librarian. Over the years, we have had temporary help. You know, we don't have student help, but we have temporary employees, and they have worked on different projects at different times. But right now we have one part-time, basically temporary employee who works on the repository consistently. But for the most part, Lisa is doing the bulk of the work. It's a full-time job, and as I said, we bring in student or temporary help for specialized projects when we're able to. So I think it's Gabe, maybe?
Yes. Good morning or good afternoon, folks. My name is Gabe Rios. I'm from Indiana University School of Medicine in Indianapolis. So the name of our repository is IUPUI ScholarWorks. So that's Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. That's what it stands for, IUPUI. It will undergo a name change, but not until next summer. Currently, Purdue and IU are splitting apart in Indianapolis, so it will be IUI ScholarWorks at some point in the near future, but it'll likely be next summer or summer of 2024. The platform that we are using is DSpace 7.6. So the 7.6 is the update that came out in the summer. We also, like Mary, like her institution, UMass, we have been running our IR for a long time. Like I said, it runs in DSpace. It was launched in 2003. So the prior dean of University Library, his name was David Lewis. He was a big advocate for change in scholarly communications early on, and he was also an early adopter of new technology. So we were lucky to have someone like that in place to be able to develop this really almost, 2 decades ago. After getting the software up and running, the campus libraries, they formed a work group to identify best practices and promote the IR service. And this group included representatives from the medical library. Currently, Hannah Craven, she is attending this conference. She is from the medical library, and she is a co-administrator on this institutional repository. Some of the first items contributed to the IR were by a medical librarian, and the medical library was also instrumental in deploying MESH as an available vocabulary within the IR. Close to about half of all the works that are shared in the repository are from School of Medicine authors, and as that may be a similar case in a lot of other institutional repositories. As for roles and responsibilities, the IR is managed by the university library, but there's a point person from each library on campus. So the university library, they have a developer that contributes about 25% of their time to code and technical help to the open source project DSpace. And there's basically about 2.5 FTE at university library dedicated to sustaining the repository. But like Kristi said, I feel like we all have to be representatives for the IR for it to be a success. And we all have to push it every opportunity that we get. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction to everyone, what everyone's doing, and I'm excited to dig in a little bit deeper. So our next question, can you tell us about one main initiative, unique collection, or noteworthy success for the IR at your institution? And then how does that support your institution's goals? And this time we're going to kick it off with Beth.
Actually, this is a very recent story. We, over the years, have helped host a nursing research day conference. Leading up to the pandemic, it was at one of the hospitals, and since then, it's been held at our nursing school. And as our health system has grown, we've really tried to get, nurses from across the health system to participate versus the one original hospital. So the last 2 years, since we've had the repository, our nursing librarian has worked with Lisa, our repository librarian, to host the event in the repository, and which is just fantastic. Really gives reach and people that want to go back and find something that they saw, dig a little deeper. It's easy to find. So also during this time, our health system has undergone a very significant leadership change where we have a whole new C-suite. And this isn't the last year and a half. They're all brand new. They're all from outside the area. So the executive vice president who oversees all of nursing attended this event last week and then was pointed to the repository where all the materials were, and she saw the map. So those of you that know Digital Commons are familiar with this usage in real-time map that shows how many downloads, where across the world this is taking place. And she was just shocked. She loved it. And in fact, spoke at a employee town hall and mentioned the map, mentioned the conference, how they want to grow it. And really in terms of supporting institution goals, well, certainly gives us visibility and, highlights our expertise, but like any other health system, we're always going after Magnet and Beacon Awards and so on and so forth. So having all this material there and then being used across the world is really powerful.
Congratulations. That's a great story. Mary, I think you're up next.
Sure. So one unique collection or focus. So one thing that really early on, as I mentioned, helped launch our repository was the interaction with some student collections. And one that we have at the moment that, in terms of the IR supporting our priorities and our goals within strategic initiatives within the library, one has been to build up the humanities collection and promoting humanities and medicine. And in partnering with the medical students and the Office of Family Medicine, that we have a podcast that the students are producing with faculty sponsorship. And it's called Murmurs, Stories from Our Journal in Medicine. And it's just great that the students came to us and wanted to have these, their home be within the repository. And they get a lot of downloads, and it's just a great way of showing the different types of material that can be showcased, that we can customize, the different collections to be unique. And it's been, I think it's been a really great thing, and it brings the students back to us for different reasons and in different ways. So Lisa did a lot of work on that, and it's been very popular.
Thanks, Gabe. Over to you.
I would say probably one of the most notable things, and again, this was a whole university-wide effort. IUPUI Faculty Council in 2014 adopted an open access policy. And one of the big things is this policy gives the libraries permissions to deposit works on behalf of authors. It helps us ensure compliance with the NIH public access policy. In most years, we make about 60% of works by our authors open access in the institutional repository. And the medical library is a key partner in this. let's see, in 2017, the medical library sent out thousands of IR records to PubMed the link out service. So as a result, our readers can now find a direct link to these in IUPUI ScholarWorks as they're searching. Also, I'll mention in 2020, there was the university library conducted a citation study and found that IUSM, IU School of Medicine authors that participated in our repository got a citation bump of more than 60% compared to colleagues that did not. So that's a good talking point for us on campus in promoting this. Oh, actually, one more thing there. How does it support our institutional goals? Well, I'll mention that IUPUI has 3 pillars that define our 2030 plan. There are student success and opportunity, transformative research and creativity, and service beyond our state. And honestly, I think the IR hits all of these. And I could go into detail, but I won't here. So.
Thank you, Robin.
Wonderful. It's so interesting to listen to these stories and learn from them. So I'll kind of build on some of what my colleagues have already touched on. It was hard to choose just one main initiative or something we're excited about, but I am very excited and very proud at OHSU of how our IR is increasingly playing a very active role in our education mission. And not just our IR, but our scholarly communication expertise that really sort of underpins that service. And just to sort of give a couple examples, because I think this can look differently, right, under that same umbrella. So, for example, Pamela Pierce, as I mentioned her before, is leading a lot of these efforts, recently received a grant from the state of Oregon to grow a narrative medicine collection specifically for our narrative medicine curriculums at OHSU. And that is in partnership with the Northwest Narrative Medicine Collaborative. So not only really providing curriculum and humanities materials that can be used in delivering that curriculum within our IR, but making that more accessible both within OHSU and outside of OHSU, and it being a partnership both within the institution and more broadly outside of the institution. Additionally, we are currently working with our School of Dentistry to create an anthology of student work within the School of Dentistry that not only gives School of Dentistry students and learners an opportunity to disseminate their scholarship, but also to experience some primary activities and sort of points within the scholarly communication workflows. And then finally, just another sort of specific example here is that more and more we're collaborating with our Academic Success Center, and they are fully aware of our IR and helping learners who want examples of other student work specifically related to assignments, theses, capstones, etc., and pointing them to the IR as a way of sort of contextualizing the road ahead of them. So that's been really exciting. And as it relates to our institution's goals, is that a couple years ago, I guess it was more than a couple because the pandemic sort of like makes time weird, but back a few years ago, our institution adopted information literacy as a graduation core competency across academic programs at OHSU. That is really exciting, and the definition of that core competency really embodies the full scope as we as librarians understand it. So the IR is a mechanism for helping learners engage and develop that competency.
Okay, well, to answer this question, I wanted to highlight one of the features in our repository that has been, I think, an important component of our repository. It was a feature actually that we had in Digital Hub and actually impacted our timeline for implementation of Invenio RDM to PRISM at Northwestern, which is this idea of communities or collections in the repository. So we leverage this communities idea heavily at Northwestern. Community is just a collection of different related resources that can be associated with a department or a research group or an institute or a project or whatever. So we have a number of different communities that include training materials and research guidance instruments from the Biostatistics Consulting Center, for example, and a number of them that reflect different research groups and other entities on campus. So as you can see, it's a nice way to bring related research resources together in an attractive way, and to be able to look at the full work of a particular group across a range of topics and across a range of different digital object types. So they're not only writing papers, they're creating instruments, they're have data sets, you know, they have different kinds of presentation materials or training materials, and all of those things can be presented together. So one of these collections, in addition to the biostatistics education and instrument materials that we have, is a grants repository that was been launched in partnership with the Northwestern University Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute, which I think everybody knows as NUCATS. So this grants repository is a collection of a range of different grants that are not only successful, but also some unsuccessful ones as well. And they're across a range of different mechanisms, from training grants to research grants to large program and institute grants. Access to this resource is not open. So not everything in our institutional repository is open, and you can understand why something like this, we may want to have some ability to control access. And so we're able to do that, but access can be requested by the Northwestern community. So in terms of how this supports our institutional goals, while this type of resource, I think we can all see strongly supports our research mission and the development of proposals that can enable Feinberg research goals, I do want to highlight the opportunity that this resource plays in supporting our trainees. So there's a common theme here. I feel like it's perfect coming off of Gabe's comments and then Robin's comments, giving them an opportunity to actually see what a real grant looks like and even connect with the researchers to ask questions. So not only helping to support their professional development, you know, obviously as they're working through the development of a research proposal to submit, but it also helps to enhance their research network. So when they're able to make those professional connections, that helps people grow. It helps them bloom in their position on campus. So it's really terrific, and it's been I think a valuable resource not only to trainees but to a range of other people on campus as well. So thank you.
Thank you all so much for answering question one. I think we were all taking notes in our respective places where we are in WebEx land, and like, oh, that's a good idea, and that's a good idea. So we kind of like to flip the script on that a little bit and ask you about something that's maybe been a little bit challenging with your IR. Do you wish there's anything that you could do differently, or a challenge that you've had in the past, and how did you overcome it, or maybe hope to overcome it if you think it's coming down the pipeline? And Gabe, we'll start with you this time.
Great. Yeah, I wish I could say everything's peachy and rosy after two decades of having an IR, but branding's definitely a challenge, and especially for our med school. Part of it is, even though we are geolocated, we're located in the same spot with IUPUI, the university. It's called IU School of Medicine, and sometimes the medical faculty wonder whether or not they're part of IUPUI or not. So that's one challenge. The other challenge I mentioned in the answer to the first question regarding the name of the repository changing and IU and Purdue University splitting up, that's also going to create a little bit of a branding challenge. we'll all be, and part of this, I mean, I think as far as overcoming this, I think part of this is training, the training we do. You know, we will be IU Indianapolis now because we're still part of the Indianapolis campus. There are things that go on above my pay grade as far as affiliation and medical school that I don't have a lot of control over. But at the moment, this is what I would like to support and would like to see go forward. IUPUI has done an amazing job with this IR, so we want to make sure there's about 35,000 things in our repository, 35,000 objects in our repository. So, you know, I think I'd like to keep growing it and keep supporting it in whatever way I can. I also think that hiring people is just in general a challenge with these, and having the FTE for it. It took the medical library a little while to bring someone on board to focus specifically on that. I was definitely we were working with the one of the parallel people at University Library for a while and knew that we needed a person that focused on scholarly communications and open access and that sort of thing. So it's nice that we actually have two people that are pretty involved. I mentioned Hannah Craven, and Brandon Piesco is another one, and he's doing a presentation a little bit later that you'll hear about. Thank you.
Robin?
Lost my mute button there for a second. Thanks. So, you know, I'll kind of say, I mentioned that we've at OHSU have had an institutional repository as a service for many years. I've been at OHSU for 12 years, and it was here when I got here. But over the last, I would say, maybe 7 years, we've actually had 3 major technology changes. So like many of you in the room, we also use Digital Commons for a long period of time. And then we moved to Samvera, which is an open source repository system. And while I think Samvera can be a very strong system for many institutions, when we chose that, we were not completely aware or cognizant of the gap between our resources to directly work on and develop that system and what we would need, right? So there was a gap between our ability to sort of help create meeting our requirements. So we struggled for a while there in really making that system work for us. And what we did differently when we made the decision to transition off of Samvera was to develop an incredibly robust set of requirements that we both developed internally in collaboration across departments and teams in the library, but also by really going out and asking our community about their needs, and also looking at that larger landscape of the institutional repository ecosystem and what was coming, what these needs were in that space. And so once we had those the requirements developed, our team, our working group for our institutional repository, spent really a whole year evaluating different systems before they selected TIND. And I think sometimes when you know you want to make a change, waiting a whole year to make that change can feel incredibly slow. But I'm so glad that our team took a step back and really invested in that, and that we were able to support them in doing that, because we really have arrived at a harmony between our resources and the technology we're using for our IR. Just in the last sort of 2 weeks, I've had 2 conversations with members of our digital collections working group that just expressed such enthusiasm for working with that system and excitement for what's next. And that might not be external in terms of feedback in that example, but having a staff that's really excited about working with your system is a real win.
Kristi?
Okay, I agree. So Robin's comment is great. Yes, having enthusiasm about a resource on the inside of the library, I think is critical. And maybe I can actually use that a bit for my answer. So one of the things that I wish I could do differently, although I don't think it would have been possible to do differently, is that I wish that I could have, helped our team implement Invenio RDM now versus, there's this phrase that I actually despise, which is, oh, we're building the plane while flying it. But it's very appropriate here because we were working on the Invenio RDM technical platform at the same time as we were trying to evolve our repository ecosystem. And so I do think that, looking back at this critically, I think we had a number of things where we were encountering opportunities to enhance the platform, but that actually created challenges for our team, right? So at the end of the day, I think we all really just want to do a good job and to have things not be like always hard. So I do think, I think that was something that I wish that we could have changed, but I think now that we are in the position that we are, where we do have the software implemented and where we are excited about the opportunities that it presents at Feinberg, we are in a much better place. I think we do also have a strong line of communication. We have a full-time developer who works on the Invenio RDM stack. And so, we are able to liaise those requests directly into the conversation so that people, everyone who's working on the roadmap can understand like, oh, we might want to move this up, or we might want to make space for this, or we should have this conversation as a program. So I think that would probably be it. I would also say, I can't emphasize enough how critical of a role our local team played in helping to manage this kind of, like I said, while the plane's in the air and we're putting wings on it, period. I think it wasn't a time of, where everything was always easy. We had built a very strong relationship with the community, with our campus. And so there were a lot of questions that came in that we weren't able to immediately address. There were a lot of needs that came in that we couldn't immediately meet. And that doesn't feel good, when your job is, helping people get to the resources and the support that they need and partnering with them. So I really appreciate the work that the Galter team did in helping to lead the campus through this time. I feel like, the sun's out and things are in a very good place now, but I definitely want to highlight the role that, Karen, Matt, everyone on the team played to get us into this position. It wouldn't have been possible without them, and it wouldn't have been possible without people working together. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristi. Beth? Beth, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Amazon came and my dog had a fit. So anyhow, yeah, there's for sure, looking back at this, how quickly it happened for us. I wish that we had had the time to really do some solid planning for, what we really wanted for the repository and how we were going to go about doing that. There just never was time or enough people to do that. So I would say, one challenge currently would be awareness. We are a very large health system, over 20,000 employees. So trying to make sure everyone is aware that this tool exists, and the value of it is certainly a challenge. We have met with marketing. I think that is they're strapped for sure. They really have not done a lot for us, I have to say. But we're proactive. We look, for opportunities. Certainly, there are grand rounds that take place in several hospitals. Other events like maybe a stroke conference or a resident event. So, we're always on the lookout for that kind of stuff, and then reaching out to the right people to tell them what we can do for them. And that's just an ongoing thing. I do think it's a challenge when you have built a relationship with a person from a department, and you're partnering to get their content into the repository, and you've come up with this great process and this great system, and the next thing you know, that person is gone. And so then you have to start all over again, and there's a gap. So trying to stay on top of that can also be a challenge.
And Mary will finish it up with you.
Last but not least, there's a long list of challenges out there when it comes to IRs. One that we have had really from the very beginning and still today, and we don't dwell on it often, but we maybe we more lament. But when we were building the repository and launching it, at the same time, there was the profile system and the Cornell Vivo system, where the CTSA program was coming out, and people, they wanted to be able to network. Who's doing work like I'm doing? Who do I collaborate all the time? Where's my faculty page? And, the profile system was launched at UMass, and it was done through IT, and it was done, I think there was at one point they asked to meet with us, but then they kind of went off on their own direction. So there's still confusion on the campus, because there's a not maintained profile system available for faculty, and then we have the repository, and the two don't talk. There was a time when we had digital commons where we were using the selected works feature to create faculty pages, but this desire for a faculty page with all of their works, their network, and questions would be like, well, who's actually going to maintain that page? I'm not going to maintain my page. Here's the library system. They're asking me to deposit works over here. Well, why can't you just do all of this for me? And very early on, we did, we asked faculty for their resumes, their CVs, and we populated the repository off of that. And we asked for full text when it was feasible to deposit it in terms of copyright and whatnot. But so it's still a problem on this campus, right? We no longer have our selected works pages. The profile system is out there, it's out of date. So like I said, we don't often try to solve this problem, but we know it's there. And it's something, like I said, we wish could be different, that it could have been a stronger partnership, that we could have these systems talking together, that they could just use the repository in some way, so that people weren't maintaining multiple systems. So yeah, I guess at this point we haven't overcome it. It still exists, but we're not letting it hold us back. Waiting for our information technology department to kind of get on board. And even though we're both, technology focused departments, we don't seem to be in alignment in terms of mission and goals, objectives. So, we are there and willing to partner and play nice, but as the director, I'm not going to let it stop us from moving forward with our goals and priorities and initiatives. So.
Well said. Thank you. We have one more question that we're going to pose to our panel, and then we'll open it up for questions in the chat. So I know that the chat's been going active, which is wonderful. So keep putting your questions in there. Our kind of final question to wrap up this part of the panel is, what is one specific future plan or hope for the IR at your institution, or for IRs in general? Because I think that was something we heard from the group, that a day like this is good to think about the future. So this time we'll start with Kristi.
Sure. So maybe I'd like to start this comment based on what Mary just said, which is just, anything we can do to help to enhance interoperability is always on on my priority list. And that was a great reminder of that, Mary. I also, one other area that I think we want to augment is more specific features and strategies to support sensitive data workflows. So personally, I'd like to see, something maybe like a FISMA compliant system with certain security requirements in place to support this. I know there are a number of features that are underway to continue to support and enhance fair data workflows. So we're excited about that as far as Invenio RDM development, and look forward to bringing that to campus through PRISM. And then, of course, we're always working to meet and exceed the characteristics that are outlined in that document that was published last year, the desirable characteristics of data repositories for federally funded research. So just a couple of quick ideas there.
Thank you. Beth?
For sure, we want to integrate our health systems archives into our repository. We have a curator who is collecting the history for 9 hospitals. No small feat for one person, for sure. And she doesn't have a lot of support from IT in terms of having a web presence. And we actually approached her and demonstrated the repository and explained that this would really be the perfect tool for her, especially for her born digital collections. So we're really hoping to get that going in the next year.
Thanks, Mary.
Sure. So I was talking with Lisa about this, and one of the things I just thought I would mention, because we talked about IRs in general, and I had asked Lisa if I was to share this, if it would be of interest. So one of the things I've been thinking about in IRs, and one of the initiatives I've had here in our regional medical library program, as well as in our library, is the promotion of graphic medicine resources. And right now there isn't a digital repository for graphic medicine materials. And so I was sharing with Lisa that I've put in a grant request to build one, but what we're trying to do is to investigate how IR can help, not IR, AI, artificial intelligence, can help with the issues that we have of like staffing, right? It takes time to identify materials. It takes time to create metadata and go through the selection process and all of that. So we do have a planning grant out there to try to see how artificial intelligence can, or tools can help with some of this work. And one of the issues around graphic medicine, because we know that AI can create metadata around, printed materials and whatnot, but when it comes to graphic medicine resources, comics, the ability of AI to read images, we know it's being used in medicine already, but how do you do this for a comic with multiple images telling a story? Is there a way to see if this can help? I guess AI as a new technology, can it help us create a new resource that right now is just too time intensive, and where it really doesn't have any ownership? So I think when we're just talking about IRs in general, workflow, staff commitment, and time, cost, so what are some of the new technologies, the new tools, and is it going to be able to make our life easier, and in which ways? So right now, like I said, I have a grant out there with the National Endowment for the Humanities as a planning grant. So I'm waiting on word for that, but I just think artificial intelligence is going to open up opportunities, and it will have an impact on digital collections. So let's kind of, again, keep being on the forefront of this and do this exploration work.
I'm picturing a MIRL 24 presentation on this very topic. We'll see what happens. All right, Gabe, over to you.
Funding comes through.
Yes.
As I mentioned earlier, we did upgrade to GSpace 7.6, and one of the features of 7.6 is that bilateral or bidirectional integration with ORCID or ORCID, depending on how you want to say it. And we have been pushing ORCID for years. This is going to, and having this integration, and I think Kristi mentioned too, having integration with other systems is really a priority for us. Basically, it's bi-directional, so it'll be updated on either side, whether it be on the IR side or whether it be on the ORCID side. We have been undergoing a concerted effort to make sure that every med student, so we're the largest medical school in the nation, so we have collectively around 1,400 med students total. There's about 364 per class. And we are working this year, this is not in place yet, like you said, future. We're working this year to get every student to have an ORCID ID when they start working on their CVs. We have had our scholarly communications librarian work with fourth-year students to make their residency applications more competitive by showing that they have a scholarly online presence already and have publications in there. I also think there's a lot we're missing. I mean, we have certain programs that we're already attached to, certain summer research programs that we deposit them, within our IR automatically, but I feel like they're kind of subsets of the whole. I think when we get all the med students on, doing this, and I'm hoping to do this in the spring of 2024, when we get all the med students doing this, I think it's going to yield a lot more depositing in our IR and some varieties of content. I'm aware that students do present at other conferences that we're not always aware about. The ones that we help maintain and manage and make sure are in there are conferences that usually happen on campus or that are medical school sponsored in some way. So that would be a big thing for us.
Great. And Robin.
Thank you. Yes to all those things. Thank you. I think we are excited and thinking similarly to my colleagues that have already spoken. Maybe that additional thing that I'll bring up that it may or may not be specific to OHSU right now in terms of what we're thinking about is we're really doing sort of a lot of thinking very broadly around engagement with our clinical community at OHSU. And as part of that, the role that the institutional repository can play. As you all know, there is scholarship that is born out of our clinical practices that may not be disseminated through more formal means, so to say, sort of quality improvement projects specifically. So we have already made inroads to partnering with our hospital colleagues, specifically within nursing, to really use the IR as a home and a place to to share and archive that work. An example is, and I'll put it in the chat, is we have a evidence-based nursing fellowship that our nurses can elect to participate in. It's often a pathway to leadership. And we started collecting and disseminating that great work in the IR a few years ago. And so I really see that's an area of growth for us. And also something that in terms of institutional priorities can be used to facilitate continued success, such as with that example, our magnet designation at OHSU.
Well, thank you so much for our few questions. We'd now like to kind of turn it over and answer some questions from the audience. So I'm going to invite Lisa Palmer, who you've heard being sung praises from Mary, to join us, and she'll be moderating the chat questions.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Let's see. Okay, so we did have some excellent questions in the chat, some of which I think have been addressed. So we do have a few minutes. We have until about 1:20. So if you do have a question, please feel free to add it. There was a question earlier for Robin that I think she addressed in the chat, but I did want to, in case she wanted to elaborate more on it, about the work that your team had done on evaluating, coming up with criteria for repositories. Do you want to say anything more about that, Robin?
I will just add that we are happy to share it. My colleague, actually, Mary Jane White, who led a lot of the sort of rubric development and evaluation in collaboration with Pam and her colleagues on the digital collections working group, have shared it already. Mary Jane is actually at DLF this week presenting on that. And I think Pamela Pierce, who's also presenting at MIRL, will talk a little bit about some of the work they've done there. But we are happy to share specifically our rubrics as well. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, I will connect you to Pam and Mary Jane. And they are really the experts for that work.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. That's great. And if there's anything we can do, the MIRL team can do to share that as well. You know, we could share links or something with attendees. I'm sure we could make that happen. Let's see. One of the questions, sort of a comment, is about metadata. One of the things that we could do in the IR community to improve interoperability is standardizing our metadata. Other than the Gray Community Initiative, does anyone know of any initiatives that you're aware of on that front in terms of interoperability?
So maybe I'll just note that, give a shout out to our friends at DataCite, who always do a wonderful job with making sure that the metadata reflects needs, and it is an evolving creature, right? So, as we have new requirements, I think that they've done a great job in bringing those issues to the fore and engaging the community in a meaningful way about that. I will also note, certainly I know this is kind of in addition to Gray, but DataCite is partnering on the Gray project. And so they're one of the contributors and have been actively also stewarding our metadata conversations in a meaningful way so that, I think we are all familiar. We've all been in libraries for too long to not have heard like the best way to deal with interoperability is to have a new data standard or to, we don't want to do that. We want to find ways to work together that, work smarter, not harder. And so, so that has been an incredible way that we've been able to do that. And we're grateful for their participation on that. So I'm going to put I'm putting a link to 2 links in the chat. I'm kind of slow on the draw as far as my real-time chat, so I appreciate everyone's patience. But there's actually 2 links here. So there's the link to the Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, or GRAY project, where you can learn a little bit about the key things that we're trying to do together and harmonize across 7 different or generalist repositories. So there's like Dryad and Mendeley Data and Figshare and, you know, kind of the usual things. And one thing I will note is that for our year 3 plans, one of the things that we'd like to do, we kind of had this realization that a lot of us that are working with generalist repositories also are implementing or applying these generalist repository technologies as institutional repositories. So some people have Figshare relationships. You know, we've implemented Invenio RDM. I know MIT and Caltech have as well. You know, there's others like that. And so there will be kind of more of an understanding of how that ecosystem all fits together. The second link is just a link to the metadata standard is there. So that's all of the outputs that we're outputting from that GRAY project. So if you'd like to take a look, please do so and let us know if you have questions.
Great. Thank you, Kristi. That's a very thorough answer. Appreciate that. Thank you. We use DataCite a lot as well, too, as a reference for metadata. So that's a great resource. So we have a question. I'm not sure it's directed at the attendees or actually at the panelists, but I'll ask the panelists. Have any of you experienced a lot of turnover at your institution, at your organizations? And if so, have you had to rework the job title for an IR manager? If you can speak to that, just go right ahead and start. I don't think it's been a long time since we've had to rework the job title at my institution, so I don't think Mary will have much to say. But do any of the other panelists have something they'd like to add about this?
The only thing that I would add is that, I mean, first off, there are never enough people working on these projects, so we're never going to have enough people. I also think that our understanding of what this kind of role is 5 years ago is different than it is right now, because of various reasons. And so maybe this is more of a call to action or an opportunity to, you know, to enhance our community of practice, you know, that's shared with everybody here today, is that these kinds of job descriptions are always evolving. And so maybe this is a great thing that MIRL can do to help us, you know, have access or to have a conversation about what characteristics might be needed for the repository manager of tomorrow. I know I'd be very interested to hear what other people are thinking in this area.
Yeah, I would echo everything Kristi just said. And while we haven't, I mean, we've had turnover at our institution, not necessarily specifically within roles that directly engage with our IR. However, we have updated job descriptions, right? We've changed titles. We probably will do that again in the near future, both to ensure that we are aligned with where our repository and sort of the larger conversation and sort of community is evolving, but also in thinking through how do we communicate that expertise to our community effectively, right? In ways that they can latch on and get excited about working with, for example, Pam or Mary Jane, et cetera.
Thank you, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think I'll move on to another question. So Mary had brought in the topic of AI and repositories, and so Stephen is asking if anyone else would like to speak more about that topic, about using AI to solve problems in the IR. Thoughts about how we would incorporate AI into the processes.
Maybe I'll just jump in just to get the conversation started. I mean, I think if you look at the tremendous work that's happening at the National Library of Medicine in terms of indexing content, it's an absolute bright spot in terms of thinking about how we can be able to address this like deluge of work that we're all seeing. So, you know, kudos to Mary. I think her project sounds really interesting, and I'll keep my fingers crossed because I think we'll all learn a lot from it. We've also been thinking about this. So we've got some pilot work in place where we're looking at metadata curation for content, applying some AI machine learning approaches. I'll also note that I think some of the work that, I mean, there is no one who understands information better than librarians. So this is work that we need to be at the table and have this conversation. This isn't something that should be happening to us from vendors. This is something we should be part of the conversation, you know, helping to champion these ideas and making sure that we're really centered and focused in and building upon you know, the way that we practice our craft in a meaningful way, right? And so I think AI is one of those topics that's kind of fraught with challenge. So there's this huge possibility, and there are major ethical considerations in play. The way that these models are trained is often not acknowledged. It's not often understood. We don't know where the data are coming from that train the models. And so I think this is really an opportunity for librarians and libraries in general to kind of lead that conversation about information literacy of the future and how that impacts AI. But well, I'm not going to speak for anybody by myself. I am very excited about this and I am excited to do more work here, and we'll see how this all shakes out. But I'm holding onto my seat because it's been moving very quickly.
And I'll just add on too and agree that this is moving very quickly. But one of the elements is also that what we've done what I've done in the proposal is try to bring in some graphic artists and cartoonists just to get their input on this. You know, how do they feel about their work, their craft being mined, you know, and having subject headings applied to it, and, you know, all sorts of things. But at the same time, I don't feel like I can build this repository without the support of the community creating it and using it, right? So, yeah, it's not just something, even though the technology seems to be like full steam ahead, we're coming a little bit behind it and trying to use it thoughtfully and responsibly. And, you know, for me, the best way to do that is with input from the creators themselves, because I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I might add there, and really thank you, Kristi and Mary, for sharing those thoughts, and just to sort of maybe piggyback on both of that, is that, you know, as Kristi noted, sort of our depth of expertise as librarians when it comes to information management and discovery, I think does really mean we need to advocate continuously for a seat at the table and bring that to those conversations. And the other component of that is, I think, our sort of value-based approach to curation and understanding and the use of AI, I think also is important, you know, to that conversation, having a seat at the table. I'm really excited to see where communities and initiatives like the Data Curation Network. They're already starting to engage with that, but that's a great example of a melding, an intentional melding of values and expertise to make data more discoverable. And I think they're an example of a perfect group to help us understand and sort of lead conversations around AI within repository work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, everyone. I see we're at time, so I'm going to wrap up this session. I want to thank the panelists for sharing their repository stories, to the attendees for your attention and participation and great questions. We had such great topics: AI, staff turnover, data curation. It's great. So we now have a short break until 1:30